Welcome to Inside Marketing with MarketSurge, your front row seat to the boldest ideas and smartest strategies in the marketing game. Your host is Reed Hansen, Chief Growth Officer at MarketSurge.
Hello and welcome back to Inside Marketing with MarketSurge. Please join me in welcoming Nick Cawthon, Product and UX Design Lead at Gauge.io and veteran digital agency strategist. With over a decade of experience crafting intuitive interfaces and data-driven research workflows, Nick has helped startups and enterprises alike turn complex tools into user-friendly experiences. He's passionate about leveraging AI to supercharge UX research, to nurture the next generation of design leaders, and bridging the gap between design and development. Today, he'll share actionable insights on everything design related.
Thanks for having me.
Nick, welcome to the podcast. Yeah, my pleasure. And Nick, I was really intrigued when we first got acquainted just to learn more about what you do. Now, so I've done as I mentioned before, I've done my internet sleuthing, and but if you might, I'm going to ask you just a twist question. Is there a fictional character that best represents what you do?
Sure.
Whether that's movies or
I will
books
give you a
or
character
TV.
type, and that is the improv comedian. I'm thinking Andy Kaufman or some of those great stand-up comedians in the past, but somebody who's really versed in improv. And I'll tell you why. Is that in my career, coming in and out of digital agencies, when you have a client list or consultancies that is varied and diverse, a lot of the times it requires you to get up to speed very quickly on the nature, the impact, the roadblocks, the perceptions of the client's given industry. And that's just the background of the logo on the side of the building. Never mind all the organizational dysfunctions and what kind of goals and KPIs that your client wants to achieve. And I consider this like an improv comedian where every 6 months somebody says, okay, it's going to be an agricultural company that needs a iPad app to help their supply chain issues. And then you have to sort of take and think, all right, how would I sort of try to sell this to a tractor salesman or whatever it might be? And that has really been a role that I've tried to tread water in for a long time, is the ability to improvise and to assess and strategize for things that I don't know much about. In fact, as a quick anecdote, I find myself currently in that place. I have a philanthropist that I'm working with who's going into an area of philanthropy that I know nothing about. And what I've been brought in to do is data visualization and charts and graphs and help compel donations to this cause. And in the past, I would watch some podcasts or documentaries, or I guess you listen to podcasts and watch documentaries, and try to get myself up to speed through conversations and qualitative research and in-depth interviews as quickly as I can. But that's being preceded these days by developing a RAG or customizing a language model. And going in and finding all the information there is on the web about this. Normally you'd put it into a folder, file folder or a Google Drive, but now you can start to feed a model and begin to ask questions of it and see how it responds. And in my case, citations of statistics and data for which I can visualize. And so that's been a really sort of context shift of how one goes from a point of not knowing to a point of knowing, to try to sound educated so that when you speak with the client, whether it be tractor salesperson or philanthropist, that you can have some pertinent questions that will hopefully go into better conversation topics than you wouldn't normally have.
Interesting. Yeah, that's a good anecdote, and I I agree with you. I don't think that I think sales has moved faster, as you mentioned, that like you have to come in prepared. And so, I've worked in agencies for a long period before we had these models or the ability to generate like a custom GPT to bounce ideas off of, and we would literally be doing deep interviews with users or potential users, and and try to derive learnings. Are you still seeing the need to do both the first-hand research, or do you think there's
Great
potential
question, Reed, and I'm glad
that's
you
no longer
asked it.
necessary?
And you framed it well too, where you left it open to say, what's your interpretation of the balance between an algorithm and a human being? And it's a conversation topic that I'm happy we get to go into. Yes, the balance always needs to occur of where are the vulnerabilities. And we can use this metaphor of a client that has come to an agency or a marketer or even to some of your small and medium-sized business owners is how do we truly understand what it is you're going through? And those human emotions only come through human conversations. I say this now, I doubt the ability to really start to get to that level of insight without all the nuances and pauses and reflections that come with well conducted qualitative research. Um, those types of those types of experiences are so much more than text based. I'll give you a well used example, but it certainly resonates here in the product design or the tech world of when Uber was a new concept, and the notion of getting into a stranger's car and conducting a transaction was novel, and nobody really was familiar with houses, let alone vehicles, all through the help of an app. And if you remember those early days of Uber, when you would open it up, you'd see taxi cabs all driving around the screen. Well, those were fake, but what they did is they helped alleviate some of the fear that the new Uber user would have of what am I doing? Like, are there other people doing this? Like, I heard about somebody riding this, but are they all around me? And well, if you see all these Uber, that must mean you are kind of entering into a level of social affirmation and acceptance because it's all over the place. And another fear that they would have is this service is so under adopted that I'm going to be waiting longer for a Uber ride than I would a normal taxi cab, and the embarrassment that I'll have of standing with my arms raised trying to flag a taxi down is going to be supplanted by me just standing there and staring at my phone and waiting for this ride. So that kind of fake activity helped assuage those two fears. One, of nobody's doing this, and it's going to be just me with some rando. And two, it's going to be inefficient, and I should go back to the way that I knew how to hail taxi services. So I don't think a algorithm will ever tell you that these are the things that your client is going through at any given point. I think that comes through experience, understanding service design, and all of those great aspects about being a strategic digital product design or marketer or that kind of positioning.
So that's that's really interesting, and as you mentioned in earlier, the my audience has a lot of small and medium sized business owners, and so there's both a skills gap in like service based design and other design principles, and a resource gap where maybe a VC backed firm like Uber could do some deep research and deep mapping of the customer journey, where sometimes these solopreneurs or multi-location service providers or retailers maybe don't have that same experience. Are there tools or techniques that everybody could start with? Like anything to
Yeah.
help them get there.
Yeah.
To compete with the enterprise
I
level
think that our ability to conduct
budgets.
surveys or outreach has been exponentially improved over the last couple of years, whether it be user testing or Facebook surveys or LinkedIn surveys. Is any time you can launch these things at scale, it gives you an entry point into a conversation. That is knowing what questions you want to ask. Again, as a small to medium-sized business owner, you have a pretty good idea of your ICP, of your customer profile, and just try to understand what questions that they would like to answer, or what barriers or roadblocks they might have in past experiences, is worth conducting a survey over. And those, again, those can be launched for, a couple $100 if you want a statistically significant response set. And I know that's not qualitative, that's more quantitative, but you can tie it in to say, hey, if you ever want any kind of follow up or engagement about what you said in that survey, here's a link to my calendar, or here's my email address, and I would love to, again, begin to engage you that way. There is a platform that I use for demand generation, who, upon registry, the CEO, as well as some of their sales development representatives, have just put their calendar out there to say, if you've got a problem with our product, you can find time on my calendar at any point. And that notion of being user centric was so refreshing. And I called them out on LinkedIn because they were giving up their time, which is the most valuable thing for any small business owner, and saying, I will meet random customers or even customers that are considering, and have that kind of feedback loop, that feedback cycle that's going to help us make more informed product decisions, marketing decisions, and strategy decisions. And so it starts with the ethos of, yes, I will constrain this to 2 or 3 sessions a week of customers that have chosen to find time on my calendar to have something to say. Good ideas or bad, it can be 20 minutes or less. And then I want to start to do surveys and outreach and polling, and have that kind of research cycle that's ongoing to help me inform some of maybe the longer term initiatives of whether or not this idea is in the right place.
Yeah, interesting. Well, I want to jump to another area. Talk about some macro trends that affect consumers of all kinds. Two that come to mind are the ubiquity of AI in so many different things, and then also remote and hybrid work being much more common. I'm sure there are others that you're very mindful of, but between those two, how are you seeing your clients and the businesses you work with adapt their offerings to these big trends? And feel free to throw in any other macro trends you think are
stay on a theme here.
relevant.
Those two macro trends of AI and automation, and then hybrid work. Again, they're taking the human out of the loop in both cases. We're finding that, again, I don't need to have somebody write you an email. I can have a script that will do so, and that's a very simple example of it. But you're also sort of consolidating teams into one person with a gift of prose, programming prose, can do it all, can replace many different creative and product management and engineering departments. One person with some basic skill can really sort of consolidate several different departments. I think that's a conversation for your product manager podcasts of, how do you start to divide up the labor or distinguish who does what when we all can do everything. And that, from an organizational design or departmental design for both digital marketing as well as product development, that's going to be coming to a forefront very quickly. If not, we've already seen it with layoffs and internal restructuring. And the second question you asked was with regards to remote work. Again, that is trust building and relationships. And we have a sort of a label called a work wife. It's somebody that you've taken with you on your career, or they've taken you and you've latched onto each other to say, we enjoy working with one another and we have the same sort of ethos and balance and responsibilities in our lives. And wherever you go, I go, and vice versa. Those kinds of people, and many of your listeners are probably coming to mind their work wife or husband, that what happens to those? Do we still have those? Do I read every 6 months online, and that's the sort of the confirmation of our emotional connection? Because, pre-COVID times, we were all in the trenches with one another, quite literally, shoulder to shoulder, in our cubicles, on our tables, and building up that emotional trust. I think that the same thing is true for you marketers out there who are developing client trust. And you need to have that approachability and accessibility that used to be across the office hallway where you'd meet at the water cooler, and now it's in some chat form. And so going out from a business development perspective and being so much more deliberate about random phone calls or lunches on a Friday and trying to keep that habit up. Reed, you and I talked about the East Bay and the San Francisco Bay Area, whereas for 20 years, I would go 9 to 5 into San
Yeah.
Francisco for whatever position or job or client I had. And that was just assumed that Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, you were in this town. And again, somewhere around 2020, that all stopped. Uh, and I've forced myself to go back into San Francisco several days a week to keep that muscle memory alive, to enjoy the serendipity that comes with walking down the sidewalk and seeing somebody you used to work with or somebody you used to work for, and making a promise to a future date where you get together and have time to catch up and share. So those were questions that I saw with the macro trends around automation and AI, as well as that humanistic stance from business development or co-working environments as well.
Yeah, yeah, no, I've felt it as well, and it's almost like your comment about having to be deliberate about scheduling face-to-face time is like I have to keep reminding myself. It's like, oh, okay, I need human touch, and I need to, I can't just keep sending
Yeah,
hundreds more emails. I
yeah,
need to
yeah.
strengthen some ties and build some trust. Now, as people, so I liked what I learned is you're trying to develop the next generation of UX professionals and leaders. What do you think is going to be different about somebody that wants to get into a UX design role or UX research role going forward? What do you think will be different about their journey than
Yeah.
the generations past? I mean, I think there's some obvious ones,
It's
but
a great
how
question.
how are they going to get to
And
be
I
effective?
work with students both here at UC Berkeley that are data scientists, as well as my alma mater, California College of the Arts in San Francisco, who are going into an MBA program in design strategy. And so you got two very different roles. The MBA program are all mid-career professionals that are burnt out from their product management jobs, and the data science students are undergraduates that are wide-eyed and bushy-tailed about how they're going to change the world. And both face their own challenges. I will give you my reflection and my journey, and then sort of pontificate about how it might have been different if that journey was happening today. As another anecdote, I brought on a graduate of California College of the Arts of the undergraduate interaction design program for a project that we took on at the beginning of the year, and she had spent the last 4 years of her university learning how to use Figma, learning how to use a specific design tool that was intended to solve a problem of interaction design and building web-based applications. And within 6 months, within 6 days, we decided that that tool was no longer going to be one that we use. We were going to pivot away from Figma because these generative tools are going to allow us much better velocity and efficiency. And we were going to start at the finish, meaning we were going to take the client's existing code base and their component library and all of the design decisions and React and Tailwind versions and all of their end product and reverse engineer any prototypes or design components based upon what's already done. And that's reducing the gap between design and development. But the question was about students and juniors coming into the career. And the lesson to be learned was that she thought she would graduate into a world in which she would be exalted by her mastery of this tool. And very quickly, 2 weeks in, that tool got put aside and said, you need to rely upon these skills rather than this tool because that tool all of a sudden became obsolete. A similar analogy was I have a friend who graduated with an economics degree in 2008, 2009, at the cratering of the stock market because of the mortgage crisis. And his comment was, everything I learned in school was obsolete within 3 weeks of me graduating because all the metrics and mantras were now thrown aside. And I think that's the case with a lot of people coming out of school now, is that we haven't figured out how to teach this on a number of different levels yet. Organizations haven't figured out how to adopt it on a number of different levels. I mentioned some of the division of labor and departmental bleed of how that is all going to change. And how young people coming into the profession will adapt is going to be interesting. I think you're going to see so much more empowerment for opportunities to say, instead of climbing up the ladder and trying to achieve the seniority, I now have a jetpack on my back. And if I want a web-based application, or if I want a subscription product, or if I have a business idea, I can get to the actuality of it so fast in ways that I could never do before, or I never could afford before. That's all now at the power of my fingertips. I just need to have the patience to learn about what everything's happening and how it's going to fall back and how it's going to fail. But again, I can do so much more. So again, not to keep going back to COVID, but this notion of job structure and seniority and promotion, I think gets called into question again. Organizations are, instead of being pyramid shaped, where you've got a lot at the bottom trying to get to the top, it's now diamond shaped, where there's not going to be many at the bottom. There's going to be a ton in the middle, and then there's going to be very few at the top again. So the lesson to be learned from that graduate of interaction design was, it's not the tool that's going to get you there. It's the thinking and the curiosity that will see you through.
Interesting. Yeah, and I have both read and contemplated, our, as many in our economy have moved away from standing or working with their hands to sitting. They have those muscles atrophied. Our backs and knees got weaker. It does. I don't know that I can quantify it or really notice, but I can't help but think that overuse of the chat GPT and other models like that might atrophy our thinking a little bit. And so to come with training on how to be a strong thinker seems to be really, really important. And so I love what you're saying. If I wanted to see if we could drill in just a little bit more on the job roles, and do you think that in years past we've had distinct roles for designer, UX researcher, developer, scrum master or project manager, a handful of different roles that were clearly delineated, and there was some wisdom in the balance to kind of check each other and to specialize. And but when we have tools, I've been playing around with like Cursor, and you mentioned Figma, and Figma's started to incorporate AI, and the AI starts to feed things into Figma, and it does kind of seem like the lines are blurring. Should we fight that tendency and try to keep a team where ideas can bounce off and we specialize, or should we embrace the trend of blurring and doing more?
Yeah, I don't think we can fight that
from
trend.
each role.
So we might as well embrace it. If we are kind of in the sandbox where we can all integrate our existing tools, whether it be Figma, that's at a very, very rough stage of integrating with these development environments. And the sooner that we can let go of those past tools and really understand what is being processed and what the limitations are, I think the more valuable we will be. You talked about the atrophy of just accepting what's being spit out, that critical thinking skills of the transparency in which I'm thinking citations and text and sort of qualitative, unstructured data, but the understanding of how is this algorithm citing and formulating these thoughts and opinions so that I might, again, poke holes in it or defend it, or instruct my algorithm to give me greater transparency on how it got to this. The same thing can be true with design. If I'm asking for components that are coming in from a Figma import, of how are you using the correct variables? Are you the correct embeddings of components within one another? Are you following an atomic design system correctly? If we're in these kinds of conversations with other engineers and product managers, and we all have a seat at this keyboard, we should be best understanding of the realm that we're bringing into this. Because the danger comes when the engineer says, "Oh, I found this thing called magic patterns," and you can type that in, and now you can bring it back into the IDE, and then you can retrofit it so that it outputs that. So I got from idea to prototype much faster than you did when you had to go and prompt everything by hand. And so I think to be aware of how rapidly this landscape is changing and these tools are eating themselves at such a rapid pace is our responsibility to our discipline. The best thing that came out of design school for me was the ability to stand up, and we used to have these foam core 8 foot by 4 foot boards where we would push pin our printed out work on and have to present to the professors in the class to say, "Here's my idea, here's my marketing concept. What do you think?" And people would raise their hand, say why you did that, why you did that. And the worst thing you could ever say was, "I don't know. I just put it up there. I thought it would look good." You have to always have some sort of reasoning and justification for what was being produced. The same thing should be true with the output from these tools. I need to understand that the output is this way because it was told to do this or not to do this or given this kind of input and variable. That way we can maintain some sense of identity and specialization, even if we're, again, playing in the same sandbox and huddling around the same keyboard.
Yeah, yeah, and that does take me to even expand on this. Something you brought up in our earlier conversation is how hard it is to be. Now we're using these very powerful models that have absorbed so much data from social media and just the internet as a whole, and we're dependent on them, and so a lot of the output starts to look standardized and similar. Um, how do we protect a brand and keep it unique, and still leverage these tools, but hold on to something that's unique and it has some novelty to it. How do we incorporate that in our
How
products
do
and
you
branding?
incorporate human emotion and sense perception? How
Yeah,
do you read
yeah,
between the lines? Because it does look the same. It's all, again, cookie cutter um, patterns and languages and words. Um, there was this, funny story about how one of the models was trained by a team in Eastern Africa, and there was a word that was endemic to that region of the country. And so, if you analyze the output from this model, you can see a recurrence of that word at an unnatural rate. Um, and so there are still humans behind this. It's not as if this is all sort of generated from nothing. That we started to train this and develop these models, and I think that that's going to be, again, I don't mean to beat a dead horse here, but those kind of critical thinking skills of, yeah, this is good enough. This is something that gets the point across, but how do you start to extrapolate what it is that the user, the viewer, the customer might be seeing, and where can we interpret more humanity in this? Um, the availability of to show there is a human behind this, I think becomes all the more important. And there are numerous ways to do so. How you position yourself. I saw there was a United Airline customer service app that had a call to action of "speak to a human," which, that that's what I do when I'm on the phone tree. I just hit
Mhm.
0 10 times, and finally the algorithm hears this
Right.
person's pissed off and takes me to an operator. I think our life is going to be like that, of just human being, please, as imperfect as we may be. There's something to that.
Right. Yeah, no, that's great. And I was prepping a blog the other day, and I was looking at an article. So it was really specific to like AI overuse in telemarketing. A lot of AI robots, and then there's some regulations that the old I think it's TCPA regulations that are not really well adapted for the AI ability. Anyway, not to get into the subject of the article, but the first line of the article, it's written by, I don't know, Logan Smith or something, and the first line was, "In today's fast-paced world," and I was like, "Oh, come on, that's like the number one giveaway that this was AI generated." You're writing about how bad AI.
I was at this
AI.
philanthropist house that I mentioned him earlier, and he had received a thank you letter from Charity Navigator, big company, and we both took 10 minutes to try to see whether or not this letter was handwritten or generative. And the imperfections of human letters was as such that I don't think I was greater than 80% confident one way or the other that it was or was not written by a machine or a individual. Given the quality of my handwriting, that's take that all with a grain of salt. So yeah, I mean, going back to your initial question is how do you start to cut through the noise? And I think that's being overly forward with a scalable way to bring out what we know to be true, the imperfections of human conversation, just as you and I sort of stutter and stop. And for anybody listening at home wondering, are we auto-generated? Is this conversation happening in between two algorithms? I can assure you my mispronunciation of the word arugula wouldn't happen on any chat bot. And so I think there's a messiness in that. The wonderful thing about the second Empire Strikes Back, the second Star Wars movie, or the fifth if you count chronologically, is that everything broke and the spaceships were patched together and there were sort of laser charring and it was all so messy. To keep throwing metaphors at the faithful listener, our local basketball team, the GM at the time talked about winning when they went on their run of several championships. And his message was that winning is really messy. It's not quick and easy. Like you've got to fail and fail and fail and fail. And to show that out as a measure of brand positioning or communication, and not to try to be as slick as that auto-gen in today's fast-paced world sentence, but to really feel like you're connecting with somebody as they would want to be spoken to. So I know that was dipping into hyperbole a little bit, but those are some of my reactions and feedback.
No. Well, Nick, you've got so much experience, and you have really shared a lot of great insights. I guess you've made me contemplate a lot of things at a high level and at the tactical level. If people would like to work with you or converse with you,
you can find me
can they
at
find you online?
gauge.io or on LinkedIn. Please do reach out. I would love to hear from you. I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area, as mentioned in our conversation. I work out of the Ferry Building several days a week, and I have a great penchant for meeting people with coffee, and about coffee. So do say hello, and maybe we can make acquaintances.
Awesome. Well, and next time I'm out in the Bay Area, I mentioned I have a brother out there. I'd love to hit you up and take you up on that offer for coffee. So that sounds fantastic. Nick, it's been a real pleasure. Thanks for joining the podcast. And to everybody in the audience, please reach out to Nick if you have ideas for design or want to improve your user experience. Nick is your guy.
Want to stay ahead of what's actually working in marketing right now? Head over to MarketSurge.io and see how we're helping businesses grow smarter, faster, and louder. That's MarketSurge.io, because your next breakthrough shouldn't be a guess.